Picture this, an ancient city, bustling with life over 4,000 years ago, its streets laid out in perfect grids, its people trading goods from distant lands, even mastering indoor plumbing long before the rest of the world. Yet, despite all these advancements, they left behind a puzzle that still baffles experts today, a mysterious script carved into seals and tablets that no one has ever fully deciphered. This is the legacy of the Indus Valley Civilization, one of history's most sophisticated yet enigmatic societies. Their symbols, etched in stone and clay, whisper secrets we're still straining to hear. What if I told you that hidden within these cryptic glyphs could be the key to understanding an entire civilization's beliefs, trade, and daily life? Imagine holding one of these artifacts, running your fingers over grooves made by someone millennia ago, knowing their words are right there, just out of reach. Out of the hundreds of symbols they left behind, some stand out as particularly striking, repeating across seals and pottery, hinting at meanings we're only beginning to guess. Were they names of kings, prayers to gods, or perhaps records of epic events lost to time? The truth is, every attempt to crack this code feels like piecing together a story where half the pages are missing. That's exactly what makes this journey so thrilling. Today, we're diving into 25 of the most fascinating glyphs from the Indus Valley, symbols that have sparked decades of debate and wonder. Some resemble animals, a charging bull, a serene elephant, while others are abstract, twisting shapes that defy easy explanation. Together, we'll explore the theories, from the tantalizing possibility of an ancient writing system to the haunting chance that we might never fully understand what they meant to the people who carved them. This isn't just about deciphering symbols, it's about touching the minds of those who came before us, reaching across thousands of years to hear their voices. So, are you ready to step into the mystery? Let's begin. The first glyph we encounter is also the most mysterious, a creature standing tall with a single curved horn, poised as if ready to charge. This so-called unicorn appears on hundreds of seals from the Indus Valley, far more than any other symbol. But here's the twist: unlike the elegant, horse-like unicorns of medieval Europe, this ancient version has a stocky body, almost bull-like, with a peculiar arched posture. Was it a real animal now lost to time, a mythological hybrid, or something else entirely? Some researchers point to the possibility of an auroch, an extinct wild ancestor of cattle, whose horns could have been stylized into a single protrusion. Others argue the posture resembles ritual scenes from Mesopotamian art, where animals often flank sacred trees or deities. Then there's the religious angle. Many seals show the unicorn standing before what looks like an incense burner or altar, hinting at a ceremonial role. Could this creature have been a sacred symbol, a bridge between the human and divine? Compare it to the unicorns of ancient Mesopotamia, where similar beasts symbolized purity and power, or even the mythical shofar of Hebrew tradition, a horn blown in sacred ceremonies. The Indus unicorn doesn't exist in isolation. Echoes of it ripple across cultures. Yet, unlike those examples, it's never accompanied by text we can read, leaving us to guess at its true significance. What's especially fascinating is how consistent the glyph is. Whether carved on tiny amulets or stamped into clay tablets, the unicorn's outline remains nearly identical, a deliberate choice suggesting it held a fixed, widely understood meaning. But here's the haunting part. If it was so important, why haven't we found it in other Indus art? No statues, no murals, just these meticulous seal impressions. Was it a signature of merchants, a royal emblem, or perhaps a word in a lost language, not an image at all? The more you study this glyph, the more it feels like a riddle wrapped in an enigma, a single note from a song we'll never hear in full. Now let's turn our attention to the second glyph, one that appears so frequently. It's impossible to ignore: the fish. Unlike the enigmatic unicorn, this symbol feels instantly recognizable, etched with clean, flowing lines that capture the essence of a river creature in motion. But don't let its simplicity fool you. In the hands of the Indus people, this humble fish might have carried layers of meaning, each ripple of its tail hinting at a deeper story. Consider the civilization's geography, a sprawling network of cities built along the mighty Indus River and its tributaries. Water wasn't just a resource, it was the lifeblood of their world. Fish would have been a daily sight, a vital food source, and perhaps even a symbol of abundance. Some seals depict the fish glyph alongside what looks like nets or traps, suggesting a practical, economic purpose, maybe a trader's mark for fishing goods or a measure of wealth. But here's where it gets intriguing. The same symbol appears on ritual objects like pottery buried with the dead. Could it have represented something sacred? In later Indian traditions, fish symbolize fertility and transformation. Think of Vishnu's first avatar, the cosmic fish that saved humanity from a great flood. Is it possible these ideas trace back to the Indus Valley? Then there's the script itself. Some linguists argue the fish glyph might not represent an actual animal at all, but a sound, a syllable in their spoken language. This theory stems from parallels with ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, where animal symbols often doubled as phonetic signs. Imagine if every time you drew a fish, you weren't picturing a creature, but a syllable like ma or sha. It's a tantalizing clue that the Indus script could be a mix of images and sounds, a puzzle within a puzzle. Variations of the fish glyph add another layer of mystery. On some seals, it's sleek and solitary. On others, it's paired with vertical lines, perhaps tally marks or numbers, or even combined with that recurring unicorn. One particularly striking example shows two fish facing each other, their bodies forming a perfect mirror image. Was this a poetic depiction of balance? A coded message, or just an artisan's flourish? Without context, we're left to wonder. What's undeniable is how this symbol bridges the practical and the profound. Whether it tracked baskets of fish at the market, invoked a water deity, or spelled out a merchant's name, it whispers of a civilization deeply connected to the rhythms of their river. And that's the haunting beauty of these glyphs. They're fragments of a world where every mark might hold multitudes. The third glyph shatters the pattern of animals and abstract shapes. Here, we glimpse what might be a human face. A stern figure with wide, owl-like eyes stares out from the seal, crowned by an elaborate headdress sporting two curved horns. This so-called man with horned headdress appears only a handful of times in the Indus Valley artifacts, but his impact is profound. Unlike the unicorn or fish, this glyph feels unmistakably personal, as if we're locking eyes with someone who walked those ancient streets. Look closer at that headdress. The horns aren't just decoration. In Mesopotamian art, horns symbolized divinity. Gods and goddesses wore them as crowns. Is this figure a priest-king mediating between mortals and gods? A deity receiving offerings? The parallels are striking. A famous Mesopotamian seal shows the hero Gilgamesh flanked by bull men, their horns nearly identical to those on the Indus figure. Yet there's a key difference. The Indus glyph lacks the dramatic combat scenes of Mesopotamian art. This figure stands alone, often with hands raised in what could be prayer or blessing. Theories spiral from there. Some scholars see echoes of the Rigveda's Pashupati, a proto-Shiva figure linked to animals and asceticism. Others note the headdress resembles water buffalo horns, animals sacred in later Indian traditions. But the most haunting detail is those oversized eyes. They're rendered with almost hypnotic precision, dominating the face. In ancient art, enlarged eyes often signified spiritual vision, suggesting this figure could see beyond the physical world. What's baffling is the context or lack of it. While Mesopotamian gods appear in full narrative scenes, the horned man stands isolated, never interacting with other glyphs. One rare seal pairs him with a kneeling worshipper, but the carving is too eroded to decipher. Was he a protective emblem stamped on goods, a ritual focus for meditation? The absence of temples in Indus cities deepens the mystery. If this was a god, where did people pray to him? Perhaps the most poignant clue lies in his rarity. While unicorns swarm in dust seals, this figure is fleeting, a whisper of something sacred reserved for special moments. Holding one of these seals, you can't help but wonder, were the horned man's eyes meant to watch over a trader's shipment, or to gaze into realms we've forgotten how to see? Now we come to two glyphs that defy the animal and human motifs entirely, the grid and the ladder. These geometric symbols stand out starkly among the swirling curves of fish and unicorns, their precise lines suggesting something far more methodical. Picture a perfect rectangle divided into smaller squares like a tiny chessboard, or a series of parallel lines connected by short rungs resembling a simple ladder. At first glance, they might seem mundane, but in the context of the Indus script, they spark urgent questions. Were these early attempts at notation? Maps of cities or even sacred diagrams take the grid first. Found on seals and pottery fragments, its uniformity is remarkable. Some divided into 4 quadrants, others into 9 or even 16 squares. Archaeologists have noted how closely these grids mirror the layouts of Indus cities themselves, with their meticulously planned blocks and drainage systems. Could this glyph have been a builder's blueprint, a way to record urban designs, or perhaps a ledger with each square representing quantities of grain or trade goods? There's a tantalizing parallel to ancient Mesopotamian accounting tokens, where clay shapes in grids tracked economic transactions. Yet, unlike those systems, the Indus grids often appear alongside other glyphs like the fish or unicorn. One seal shows a grid bisected by a single diagonal line, a mark that in later Indian mathematics symbolized the intersection of cosmic order and earthly chaos. Was this a numerical concept or something spiritual? Then there's the ladder. Unlike the rigid grid, this glyph feels dynamic. Its rungs sometimes evenly spaced, other times clustered at the top or bottom. In later Indian traditions, ladders symbolize ascension. Think of the Rigveda's ladder to heaven, or Buddhist depictions of souls climbing toward enlightenment. But here's the twist. Indus ladders frequently appear in sequences, sandwiched between glyphs that might be names or titles. One famous tablet shows a ladder flanked by 2 horned men, their arms raised as if mid-ceremony. Could this have been a ritual instruction, a step-by-step guide to some long-lost rite? Or maybe a genealogical record with each rung representing a generation? What's most intriguing is how these geometric symbols interact with the rest of the script. On a broken pot from Mohenjo-Daro, a grid is paired with 7 short strokes, a possible tally. Elsewhere, a ladder curves unexpectedly, its top rung morphing into a fish's tail. These combinations suggest the glyphs weren't standalone images, but part of a flexible system where meaning shifted based on arrangement. Imagine if the letter A could represent an apple when vertical, but an arrow when horizontal. That's the kind of puzzle we're facing. The grid and ladder challenge us to rethink what writing even is. Without Rosetta Stone to guide us, we're left tracing echoes. The grid's kinship to modern infographics, the ladder's uncanny resonance with symbols from distant cultures. Were these prototypes of an alphabet that never fully evolved, or a wholly unique language of shape and space waiting for us to crack its logic? Every time we label them as just geometry, they seem to ripple, revealing new layers, like fragments of a conversation we're only beginning to overhear. Among the most striking and controversial glyphs from the Indus Valley is one that instantly catches the eye, a symmetrical cross with arms bent at right angles, spinning outward like a cosmic wheel. Today, we recognize this shape as the swastika, but long before it carried modern associations, it appeared in Indus seals as early as 2500 BCE, centuries before its emergence in Hindu, Buddhist, and even Native American traditions. What could this symbol have meant to the people of the Indus Valley? One compelling theory ties it to the sun's movement. On several seals, the swastika appears alongside what might be solar motifs, radiating lines or circles hinting at a celestial connection. In later Indian religions, the swastika symbolizes the sun's journey across the sky, a wheel of eternal renewal. Could the Indus people have seen it the same way? A tiny seal from Harappan shows the glyph surrounded by 4 dots, possibly representing seasons or cardinal directions, reinforcing the idea of cyclical time. But there's another layer. Unlike later swastikas, which often face right, Indus versions spiral both clockwise and counterclockwise, sometimes on the same artifact. This deliberate variation suggests nuanced meanings, perhaps contrasting forces like day and night or creation and destruction. One broken tablet pairs the symbol with a plant-like glyph, leading scholars to speculate about its ties to agriculture and abundance. Imagine a farmer stamping this mark on a clay tag for a harvest offering, invoking growth and good fortune. The most haunting question is why this symbol appears so sparingly in the Indus record compared to others. Was it reserved for sacred objects since lost to time, or was its meaning so universally understood that it rarely needed carving? The swastika's journey from these ancient seals to its twisted modern legacy reminds us how symbols can shape and shatter worlds, their meanings rewritten across millennia. Holding an Indus seal with this glyph, you're left wondering, if we could hear the whispers of its original makers, what would they tell us about the power we've poured into these 4 simple lines? The elephant glyph stands apart from the other Indus symbols in ways that are both illuminating and deeply puzzling. Unlike the stylized unicorn or the abstract grid, these carvings depict an animal with astonishing anatomical precision, rounded ears, a sinuous trunk, even the distinctive curve of tusks. It's not just a generic pachyderm, it's unmistakably an Asian elephant, a detail that becomes crucial when we consider the bigger picture. While Mesopotamian art of the same era shows creatures like lions and bulls, elephants are conspicuously absent from their cultural record until much later. This discrepancy isn't just artistic, it's a clue. The presence of elephant glyphs in the Indus Valley suggests a civilization deeply familiar with these animals, possibly even domesticating them centuries before other regions. Examine the glyph's evolution and the story grows richer. Early examples from sites like Harappan show elephants with simplistic, almost childlike outlines, a trunk here, a tusk there. But as the civilization flourished, the carvings gained startling realism. One seal from Mohenjo-Daro captures the elephant mid-stride, its weight distributed exactly as it would be in life, the musculature of its legs rendered with near-scientific accuracy. This progression hints at something extraordinary. The artisans weren't just copying a symbol, they were observing living elephants, perhaps even working alongside them. Could these glyphs be the work of a guild specializing in animal depictions, or were they commissioned by elites who kept elephants as status symbols? The dating implications are equally fascinating. Unlike Mesopotamian cultures, which only encountered elephants after trade routes expanded, the Indus people seem to have coexisted with them from the start. Some seals even show elephants with ropes or harness-like markings, fueling debates about early domestication. A particularly provocative tablet from Dolivera pairs the elephant glyph with what might be a howdah, a saddle-like structure. If confirmed, this would push back evidence of elephant riding by centuries, rewriting our understanding of ancient animal husbandry. But here's the twist: despite their anatomical precision, these elephants are never shown in natural settings. No jungles, no rivers, just the solitary animal, often framed by that same enigmatic script. This absence speaks volumes. In Mesopotamian art, animals are part of narratives, hunted by kings, battled by gods. The Indus elephants, by contrast, feel like symbols divorced from story, perhaps representing concepts rather than literal creatures. One recurring motif places the elephant beneath a crescent shape, possibly a moon or a vessel. Could this symbolize an astrological link, like the later Hindu association of elephants with rain-bearing clouds? Or was it a trader's mark for ivory, a commodity the Indus people famously exported? The most haunting examples come from the civilization's decline. Later glyphs grow increasingly abstract, the elephants reduced to geometric fragments, a tusk becomes a line, the trunk a mere curve. It's as if the knowledge of the living animal was fading, leaving only its ghost in the script. Yet even in these diminished forms, the glyph persists, a testament to the elephant's enduring significance. Holding one of these later seals, you can almost feel the weight of that loss, the shift from observation to repetition, from intimacy to mystery. What began as a portrait of a creature they knew intimately ends as a cipher, its original meaning swallowed by time. This glyph does more than date the civilization, it mirrors its trajectory. The elephant's journey from vivid realism to abstract symbol parallels the Indus Valley's own transformation, from a culture rooted in tangible, observable detail to one whose language we can no longer fully grasp. In that sense, these carvings are more than art, they're a silent chronicle of how knowledge slips away, and how even the mightiest symbols can become shadows of what they once were. Amid the menagerie of animals and geometric precision of Indus Valley glyphs, one symbol stands out for its organic elegance, the tree. Not just any tree, but a carefully rendered plant with sweeping, heart-shaped leaves, often sprouting from what looks like a pot or pedestal. This isn't a generic sketch, the details suggest a specific species, and many researchers believe it's the sacred pipal, known today as the Bodhi tree under which Buddha attained enlightenment. But here's what's fascinating, this glyph appears in two distinct forms. Some carvings show it as a solitary figure, its branches symmetrical and serene. Others depict it flanked by worshippers or animals, echoing scenes from Mesopotamian seals where sacred trees symbolize divine connection. The tree's prominence hints at something deeper than decoration. Indus cities were marvels of urban planning, with grid-like streets and advanced drainage, yet they also reserved space for greenery. Archaeologists have found evidence of public gardens and even tree-lined avenues, suggesting a harmony between built environments and nature rarely seen in ancient civilizations. Could this glyph have been a blueprint for urban green spaces, a marker for parks or sacred groves? One seal from Lothal shows the tree symbol alongside a water glyph, reinforcing the idea of ecological balance, a visual mantra for sustaining life in a bustling city. Then there's the ritual angle. Later Indian texts describe the pipal as the abode of gods, its leaves whispering cosmic secrets. The Indus tree glyph often appears near what might be altars or offering stands. A broken tablet from Harappan shows a figure, possibly a priest, pouring libations at its roots, mirroring Vedic rituals where trees were mediators between earth and sky. But the most striking parallel comes from Mesopotamia, where the tree of life symbolized immortality. Unlike those renditions, though, the Indus tree lacks celestial creatures or gods hovering nearby. It stands self-contained, as if its sacredness needed no external validation. Variations in the glyph add layers of intrigue. Some trees have fruits dangling like tiny bells, others sprout radiant lines resembling sunlight. A rare seal from Dolivera frames the tree within a circular motif, turning it into a cosmic diagram. Was this an early mandala, a seasonal calendar? The precision suggests it held multiple meanings, adaptable to context, a living symbol rather than a static sign. What lingers is the tree's quiet resilience. Long after the Indus cities faded, the pipal remained sacred, its roots threading through millennia of Indian spirituality. Holding a seal carved with this glyph, you're left wondering, did later traditions inherit a symbol they no longer remembered originated here, or was the tree's reverence something universal, whispered independently by cultures across time? Either way, this glyph feels like a rare bridge, a living echo from a civilization that, for all its mystery, still speaks through the rustle of leaves. Tucked among the animal motifs and cryptic geometry of Indus script, two unassuming glyphs tell a surprisingly layered story: the jar and the pot. At first glance, they seem straightforward, their curved profiles instantly recognizable as vessels for storage or transport. But look closer, and their simplicity unravels into mystery. These containers aren't just functional objects, they're rendered with deliberate details, some with flaring rims, others with delicate handles, a few even adorned with patterns resembling woven basketry. Such specificity hints that these weren't generic symbols, but careful depictions of real containers used in daily life. Archaeologists have found actual pottery from Indus sites matching these glyphs almost exactly: wide-mouthed jars for grain storage, slender pots for liquids, even miniature versions buried as grave offerings. Now consider the context. The Indus Valley was a trade powerhouse, its merchants exporting everything from cotton to carnelian beads as far as Mesopotamia. Many seals bearing the jar glyph also feature clusters of short strokes, possibly numerical notation. Could these have been inventory marks stamped on shipments of olive oil or barley? One tablet from Lothal shows the jar symbol beside a fish, a combination that might have represented a preserved food trade. But here's where it gets intriguing: the same glyph appears on ritual objects. A haunting seal from Mohenjo-Daro depicts a pot suspended between two figures, its contents spilling like cascading light. Compare this to later Hindu Kalasha ceremonies, where pots symbolize abundance and divine grace, or even Mesopotamian libation rituals. Was the Indus pot glyph pulling double duty, recording trade quantities in one context and invoking blessings in another? The variation in design deepens the puzzle. Some jars are bulbous, echoing the pithoi storage vessels of ancient Crete, while others taper like the drinking lotus still used in South Asia today. A few rare examples show pots with lattice-like patterns, possibly representing the woven reed containers used for fragile goods. This attention to form suggests the glyphs weren't just labels but carried nuanced meanings. A ribbed jar might signify water storage, while a handled pot could mark precious spices. Perhaps most tantalizing is the glyph's evolution. Early examples are robust, with thick walls mirroring the sturdy pottery of the civilization's peak. Later versions grow slimmer, more abstract, as if the original vessels were fading from memory. By the time the script nears its end, the pot glyph sometimes reduces to a mere U-shape, its functional details lost. It's a subtle echo of the civilization's own transformation from a culture deeply rooted in material precision to one whose symbols were becoming ghosts of their former selves. What lingers is the duality of these humble shapes. They could tally goods in a merchant's ledger one moment and symbolize the vessel of the cosmos the next. In that sense, the jar and pot glyphs embody the Indus civilization itself, practical yet profound, anchored in the tangible but always reaching toward the unseen. Holding a seal stamped with one of these symbols, you're left wondering, did the artisan who carved it see a kitchen staple, a sacred emblem, or both? The answer, like so much here, is written in clay but spoken in a language we're still learning to hear. Sharp angles set the arrow glyph apart from the fluid curves of other Indus symbols, a stark, deliberate shape that feels almost urgent in its simplicity. Unlike the fish or elephant, this isn't an attempt to capture nature. It's a human invention, a tool turned into a sign. But here's what's fascinating: the arrow doesn't point uniformly. Some versions tilt upward like a projectile mid-flight, others angle downward as if striking prey, and a few even lie horizontal, suspended like a compass needle. Each orientation might hold a separate meaning, a visual vocabulary we've yet to crack. Start with the obvious: weapons. The Indus people certainly used arrows. Archaeologists have found flint arrowheads at Harappan, some still lodged in animal bones. A seal from Chan-hu-Daro shows the arrow glyph alongside a figure holding what looks like a bow, reinforcing its martial connection. But unlike Mesopotamian battle scenes where arrows rain down in chaotic violence, the Indus glyph feels measured, almost ritualistic. One tablet pairs it with a unicorn, the arrow hovering near the creature's heart. Was this a hunter's mark, a tally of successful expeditions, or something darker, a symbol of sacrifice? Then there's direction. Indus cities were meticulously planned, their streets aligned to cardinal points. Could the arrow have served as a navigational aid, etched into clay maps or trade routes? Compare it to Mesopotamian boundary stones, where arrow-like symbols denoted territorial lines. A broken pot from Mohenjo-Daro bears a sequence of arrows spiraling outward, perhaps instructions for travelers or a merchant's ledger tracking exports. The most tantalizing theory ties the arrow to the stars. In later Vedic texts, arrows symbolize celestial forces, the rays of the sun, the trajectory of planets. One Indus seal shows the glyph piercing a crescent shape, eerily resembling Babylonian astronomical symbols for eclipses. Another places it near a cluster of dots, like a constellation mapped in miniature. If this was their version of an astrological sign, it would mean the Indus people weren't just observing the sky, they were encoding its movements into script. What lingers is the glyph's duality, practical yet cosmic, as at home in a hunter's tally as in a priest's celestial chart. Unlike Egyptian or Mesopotamian arrows, which stayed firmly rooted in warfare or royalty, the Indus symbol refuses to be pinned down. It's as if they distilled the very essence of arrowness, its violence, its guidance, its flight into a shape that could mean all these things at once. Every time we think we've grasped its purpose, it veers in a new direction, leaving us chasing its meaning like a target just out of reach. The eye glyph peers out from Indus Valley seals with an unsettling intensity, unblinking, almond-shaped, its pupil a single deep dot that seems to follow you across millennia. Unlike the more abstract symbols, this one feels alive, as if the artisan didn't just carve an image but captured a gaze. What's striking is how it distills the essence of an eye to its purest form. No lashes, no lids, just the bare geometry of sight. Yet despite its simplicity, the effect is hypnotic, even ominous. This isn't just a body part rendered in clay, it's a symbol heavy with unspoken power. Look closer and the parallels to later traditions become uncanny. In ancient Mesopotamia, eye motifs warded off evil, often embedded in amulets or doorways. Egyptian Eye of Horus symbols represented healing and royal protection. Fast forward to modern South Asia, where the Nazar or evil eye charm still dangles from baby cradles and rearview mirrors. The Indus eye glyph sits at the root of this lineage, not just a precursor, but possibly the earliest known iteration of an idea that would span continents and epochs. One seal from Harappan shows the eye centered on a pottery vessel, its stare confronting anyone who lifted the lid. Was this a protective mark for stored grain? A warning to thieves or an invocation for divine oversight? Theories diverge sharply here. Some scholars see the glyph as a literal representation of surveillance, perhaps a ruler's emblem asserting control, like the all-seeing eyes on later coins. Others argue it's metaphysical, a depiction of the third eye concept that later appears in Hindu and Buddhist meditation practices. A fragmented tablet found near the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro adds fuel to this view. It shows the eye glyph floating above a row of kneeling figures, their hands raised as if in awe. The posture mirrors yoga's pranam gesture, suggesting a spiritual rather than punitive gaze. What's especially haunting is how the eye interacts with other glyphs. On some seals, it perches above the unicorn's horn, its pupil aligned perfectly with the tip, a deliberate composition implying vision and weaponry intertwined. Elsewhere, it's enclosed in a hexagonal frame, a design echoed in later tantric art where geometric shapes amplify a symbol's energy. But the most chilling examples are those where the eye appears inverted, its curve turned downward like a weeping lid. These variants often cluster near burial sites, hinting at a funerary role. Could the downward eye symbolize the watchfulness of ancestors, a guardian against restless spirits? The glyph's craftsmanship deepens the mystery. While most Indus symbols were stamped uniformly, the eyes show subtle variations. Some pupils are drilled deeper, others offset slightly as if glancing sideways. This individuality suggests each carver imbued the symbol with personal intent, adapting a shared lexicon for private meaning. A tiny amulet from Dolivera bears an eye with radiating lines, transforming it into a sunburst. Another from Lothal frames it with zigzags, evoking lightning. Such details imply the eye wasn't a static sign, but a flexible vessel able to contain wrath, vigilance, or enlightenment depending on its context. Perhaps the most provocative clue lies in its scarcity. Unlike the ubiquitous unicorn or fish, the eye glyph appears only a dozen times across thousands of artifacts. This rarity suggests it wasn't for everyday use but reserved for moments of profound significance, a king's decree, a priest's blessing, or a plea against calamity. In that sense, every surviving example feels like a fossilized heartbeat, a pulse of fear or hope pressed into clay. When you hold one of these seals, you're not just studying a symbol, you're meeting a gaze that has outlasted empires, still watching, still waiting for us to understand its silent language. Among the most tantalizing glyphs from the Indus Valley are those that defy singular interpretation, intricate composite signs where familiar symbols like fish, arrows, and trees interlock or stack, forming entirely new configurations. These combination glyphs don't just repeat earlier motifs, they twist them into something more complex, suggesting a language capable of nuance far beyond simple pictographs. Take one remarkable seal from Mohenjo-Daro. A fish glyph arches over a row of vertical strokes while a tiny horned man peers from beneath its tail. Another tablet layers a tree atop a ladder, its roots entwined with the rungs. Were these early attempts at compound words, royal insignias, or perhaps even poetic metaphors lost to time? The sheer variety of combinations challenges any simple explanation. Some paired glyphs appear consistently, like the recurring duo of a unicorn and a jar, carved with such precision they almost feel like a standardized phrase. Others are utterly unique. One fragment from Harappan shows an elephant cradling a sun symbol in its trunk, a composition found nowhere else in the corpus. This inconsistency is key. If these were merely determinatives, symbols clarifying categories like Egyptian glyphs indicating god or city, we'd expect rigid patterns. Instead, the fluidity suggests a script flexible enough to invent new meanings on the fly, much like how Chinese characters combine radicals to create nuanced ideas. Consider the spatial relationships. In later writing systems, placement matters. Think of Mayan glyph blocks, where a small sign above a larger one modifies its meaning. The Indus combinations show similar intentionality. A fish glyph positioned inside a pot might imply preservation or trade, while the same fish beneath a tree could symbolize ritual offering. A particularly enigmatic seal stacks three glyphs vertically, a grid, a swastika, and an arrow pointing downward. The sequence feels deliberate, almost narrative, a celestial event recorded. A legal decree without context. We're left to trace the grammar of a language without a dictionary. The human element adds another layer. Many composite glyphs appear on seals with wear patterns suggesting frequent use, their edges smoothed by generations of hands pressing them into clay. These weren't ornamental, they were functional, perhaps identifying merchants or offices. One well-used seal from Lothal combines a ship glyph with a cluster of grains, likely a trader's mark for agricultural exports. Yet others, like a haunting tablet showing an eye cradled between two hands, feel intensely personal, even devotional. Was this a prayer carved in symbols, a name meant to invoke protection? What's most striking is how these combinations mirror the civilization itself, a culture that blended practicality and profundity, where a single seal could track sacks of grain one moment and articulate a cosmic idea the next. The composite glyphs don't just represent a writing system, they're a window into how the Indus people thought, how they saw connections between the tangible and the transcendent. Every time we decode a fragment, it's like catching a whisper of their logic, a glimpse of a mind that could weave arrows into trees and turn fish into stories. Yet for all we uncover, the full syntax of their symbols remains just out of reach, a conversation half heard through the walls of time. The footprint glyph carves an arresting presence into the handful of Indus Valley seals where it appears, a solitary outline, toes delicately defined, pressed into clay as if its maker had just stepped away. Unlike the abstract grids or stylized animals, this symbol feels startlingly human, a direct imprint of someone who walked those ancient streets. But was it a literal record of travel, a mark of possession, or something more mystical? The contexts in which it surfaces only deepen the intrigue. One pivotal example comes from a ceiling found near the docks of Lothal, where the footprint appears alongside a ship glyph and a series of wavy lines resembling water. The arrangement feels narrative, a journey by sea, perhaps a trader's route stamped onto cargo as a form of itinerary. Archaeologists have noted similar traveler's marks in Mesopotamian contracts, where footprint symbols ratified agreements to deliver goods across distances. Yet the Indus glyph lacks the bureaucratic flourishes of those records. Instead, it carries an almost personal weight, like a signature in clay. Then there's the matter of scale. Some footprints are large and splayed, echoing the barefoot impressions found in kiln-fired bricks at Mohenjo-Daro, suggesting they might have been literal copies of an individual's foot, pressed into wet clay as a form of identification. One particularly poignant seal from Harappan shows a child-sized footprint beside a jar glyph, a combination that could denote inheritance or familial trade rights. Compare this to later Indian traditions where footstep motifs symbolize the presence of deities or ancestors. In Hindu temples, the paduka sandals of saints are revered as proxies for their spiritual essence. Could the Indus footprint have served a similar role, a way to invoke an absent person or even a god? The glyph's rarity amplifies its mystery. Out of thousands of inscriptions, fewer than 20 feature the footprint, and no two are identical. Some toes curl slightly, others are rigid as if frozen mid-step. A broken tablet from Dolavera pairs the symbol with an arrow, the footprint angled sharply as if turning direction. Was this a boundary marker, a ritual dance step preserved in clay? The variations hint at a symbol adaptable to circumstance, its meaning shifting like the impression left in wet sand. Most haunting are the seals where the footprint appears isolated, centered on the tablet like a votive offering. One such example, found near the Great Bath, shows the glyph encircled by tiny dots, possibly stars or droplets. It's impossible to overlook the parallel to later Buddhist Buddhapada art, where footprints adorned with cosmic motifs represent the Buddha's transcendence. The Indus version feels like a precursor, a whisper of an idea that would echo through millennia. Every time this glyph surfaces, it blurs the line between the practical and the sacred. Whether it guided merchants across oceans, sealed a potter's claim to his wares, or served as a conduit for prayers, its power lies in its immediacy. Unlike the enigmatic unicorn or the geometric grid, the footprint doesn't ask us to decipher, it asks us to step closer, to feel the weight of a presence that walked this earth long before us, leaving stories in the clay beneath our fingers. The star or flower glyph bursts onto Indus Valley artifacts with a radiance that refuses to be ignored, a symmetrical burst of lines, usually 6 or 8, radiating from a central point like sunlight or petals unfurling. At first glance, it's easy to assume this symbol represents something celestial, a star, perhaps, or even a stylized sun. But the moment you dive deeper, the certainty fractures. Could those same lines depict a blooming flower, its petals reaching toward the sky? The debate between astronomers and botanists over this glyph's true meaning reveals just how layered Indus Valley symbolism can be. Consider the celestial argument. Several seals place the star glyph alongside crescent shapes, possibly moons, and clusters of dots resembling constellations. One tablet from Mohenjo-Daro shows the symbol hovering above a horned figure, its rays pointed downward like beams of divine light. Even more compelling is its seasonal pattern. These glyphs appear most frequently on artifacts excavated from layers corresponding to harvest months, suggesting a link to solar cycles or navigational markers for planting. In later Vedic texts, 6-pointed stars represented the solstice, a critical time for agrarian societies. Could the Indus people have used this glyph to track seasons, etching it into almanacs or temple walls? Yet the floral interpretation holds its own weight. The Indus Valley was a civilization deeply connected to nature, with advanced knowledge of cotton cultivation and trade in aromatic woods. The glyph's delicate, curving lines resemble specific flowers native to the region. The 6-petal lotus, revered in later Indian traditions, or the star jasmine, whose blossoms open at predictable intervals. A broken pot from Harappan shows the symbol sprouting from a stem-like line, its petals asymmetrical as if caught mid-bloom. Even the number of rays varies. Some have 5, others 7, mirroring the natural irregularity of flora rather than the fixed geometry of stars. The context of discovery adds another layer. Many star or flower glyphs appear on vessels found near communal granaries, often paired with what might be grain tallies. Were they blessings for fertile harvests stamped onto storage jars like ancient, best-by dates? Or do the clustered examples near water channels hint at irrigation schedules, with each petal representing a lunar phase? The opposing theories collide most strikingly in a single artifact, a seal from Dolivera where the glyph is encircled by fish. Astronomers see a solar eclipse foretold by fish-shaped constellations. Botanists point to floating lotus blossoms, their roots anchored in riverbeds. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that the glyph was never meant to be one or the other. In a culture that blended practicality and poetry, the star flower could have been both, a symbol of the sun's power to make seeds sprout, or of flowers that track time by their opening and closing. Later Hindu art often fuses celestial and vegetative motifs, like the Kalpavriksha, a divine tree whose fruits grant immortality. Maybe the Indus people saw no divide between sky and soil, their glyphs capturing the unity of forces that fed their world. What lingers is the glyph's quiet defiance. Unlike the rigid unicorn or the unambiguous elephant, this symbol refuses categorization, its meaning shifting with every new discovery. The longer you study it, the more it seems to pulse alternately a star's cold glow, a flower's fleeting bloom, or something in between, a language of light and growth we're still learning to read. Between the animal motifs and abstract lines, 2 glyphs carve out a space entirely their own structures rising from the clay like silent sentinels. The first resembles a stark gateway, its upright pillars supporting a heavy lintel, while the second frames a stepped platform crowned by what might be a shrine or altar. At first glance, they seem straightforward blueprints of the very buildings that once lined Indus streets. Yet the longer you study them, the more these architectural symbols blur the line between city planning and sacred geometry. Start with the gate glyph. Its design mirrors the massive entryways found at Indus sites like Dolivera, where 10-ton stone doorjambs once framed passageways into the city. These weren't just functional, their proportions were deliberate, with widths precisely calibrated to processionals or trade caravans. One seal shows the gate glyph paired with a row of tiny figures, their arms raised as if in ceremony, a scene echoing Mesopotamian rituals where kings passed through temple gates to receive divine favor. But here's what sets the Indus version apart. Some variants overlay the structure with a single eye glyph, transforming a physical barrier into a watchful threshold. Was this a guardian symbol stamped on goods entering the city, a marker for toll stations, or perhaps a metaphor, the gate as a portal between mundane and spiritual realms? Then there's the temple glyph, a tiered structure that evokes the ziggurats of Mesopotamia or the later shikaras of Hindu temples. Its stepped profile matches excavated platforms at Mohenjo-daro, where fire altars and ritual baths suggest spaces consecrated for worship. Unlike the gate's uniformity, this glyph appears in startling variations. Some are minimalist, just 3 stacked rectangles. Others explode with detail. Carvings show tiny figures kneeling at its base or celestial symbols hovering above its summit. A particularly vivid seal from Harappa places the temple glyph between 2 horned men, their hands clasped around it like stewards of something sacred. The duality of these symbols is what lingers. The same gate that regulated commerce might have marked pilgrim routes. The temple that hosted rituals could have doubled as administrative hubs. In a civilization that left no obvious palaces or grand tombs, these glyphs become clues to how the Indus people negotiated power and piety. Later cultures would rigidly separate fortress and sanctuary, but here, a single symbol could be both, a reminder that every wall they built might have held 2 faces, one of earth, the other of heaven. The hand glyph stretches across Indus Valley seals in a spectrum of gestures, some palms open and upturned as if receiving an offering, others clenched around unseen objects, fingers bent with startling precision. Unlike the rigid uniformity of animal symbols, these hands feel alive, frozen mid-motion by artisans who clearly studied human anatomy with an almost clinical eye. One of the most striking examples shows a right hand, its fingers slightly splayed, pressed into clay with such detail that the walls of fingerprints remain visible 4,000 years later. Was this a personal signature, a craftsman's pride in their work, or something far more ritualistic? Context offers tantalizing clues. Several hand glyphs appear near what might be measuring sticks, vertical lines marked with notches, leading some researchers to propose they represented standardized units, like the Egyptian cubit or the Harappan angular, later used in Indian temple architecture. A ceiling from Lothal pairs the hand symbol with stacked grains, suggesting it could have denoted a fixed volume, a handful as a practical measure for trade. Yet other examples defy utilitarian explanations. A haunting tablet from Mohenjo-daro depicts 2 hands cupped together, cradling a tiny circle that could be a seed, a coin, or even a celestial body. The composition mirrors later Hindu Anjali mudra, where pressed palms symbolize reverence. Could this glyph be the earliest known depiction of a prayer gesture? The variations in grip deepen the mystery. One recurring motif shows a hand clenched around a vertical rod, its fingers overlapping in a way that implies motion, perhaps twisting or grinding. Archaeologists have found actual terracotta pestles matching this shape at Kalibangan, hinting at a link to food preparation or medicine making. Another seal fractures expectations entirely. A single index finger points upward, isolated from the rest of the hand. In later Indian iconography, such a gesture Tarjani mudra wards off evil, but here it floats beside an elephant glyph, creating a narrative we can't decipher. Was this a warning about dangerous animals, a guidepost for mahouts? Most provocative are the rare composite hands, glyphs where fingers morph into other symbols. On a worn amulet from Harappa, the thumb elongates into a sprouting plant, while the pinky curls into a fishhook shape. Another seal fuses 3 hands at the wrist, their fingers fanning out like rays of the sun. These hybrids suggest the Indus script might have had a layer of metaphor where body parts could transform into ideas. Imagine if the word hand in their language also meant to give or to create, and scribes illustrated that by literally shaping the glyph into what it represented. What lingers is the intimacy of these carvings. Where the unicorn and elephant glyphs feel observational, the hands seem participatory, a self-portrait of the civilization caught mid-action. Whether measuring grain, blessing a child's amulet, or marking a potter's finest work, they reach across millennia with quiet urgency, fingers poised between meaning and mystery. Each crease in the clay whispers the same unanswerable question. What were we holding, gliding across Indus Valley seals with sleek, curved hulls and high prows? The boat glyph captures a civilization literally shaped by water. Unlike the static unicorn or geometric grid, this symbol pulses with motion, sometimes carved with oars mid-stroke, other times festooned with what might be banners or fishing nets. The precision of these designs isn't artistic license. Archaeologists have unearthed terracotta boat models from Harappan and Lothal that mirror the glyphs exactly, down to the reinforced ribs along their hulls. One particularly striking artifact, a clay model from Mohenjo-Daro, shows a deckhouse and removable mast, details meticulously reproduced in a seal found over 200 miles away. This wasn't just a pictograph, it was technical drawing, a blueprint of vessels that plied the Indus and beyond. Consider the sheer scale of maritime trade this implies. Chemical analysis of Mesopotamian clay tablets reveals references to Meluhan ships, believed to be Indus vessels docking at Mesopotamian ports as early as 2300 BC. The boat glyphs often appear alongside cargo notations, clusters of jar symbols or grain tallies suggesting they functioned as customs stamps. A ceiling from Lothal's dockyard pairs the boat with a fish and a series of wavy lines, a possible bill of lading for preserved seafood exports. But here's where the symbol transcends commerce. Some variants incorporate architectural elements, like a tiny stepped platform on deck. Was this a floating shrine? A precursor to the sacred houseboats of Kerala, the parallels to later Hindu Jalmandir rituals where deities are ferried on ceremonial barges are hard to ignore. The glyph's evolution tells its own story. Early versions are simple, barely more than crescent shapes. By the civilization's peak, they're elaborate. Some show steering oars, others what might be cabins or even dual hulls. A seal from Dolavera depicts a boat glyph cradling a crescent moon, a celestial motif echoed in later Babylonian depictions of moon gods aboard ships. Then, as the civilization declined, the glyphs regress into abstraction, their nautical details fading like the memory of open water. The last examples are mere arcs, ghostly echoes of hulls that once rode the waves. What lingers is the boat's duality, both workhorse and cultural icon. Whether stamped on a trader's clay tag or etched into a ritual amulet, it carried more than cargo. It bore the identity of a people who saw rivers not as boundaries but as living roads. In that sense, every boat glyph is a miniature epic charting journeys of salt and silver, of earth and spirit, still sailing through time. The serpent or wave glyph coils across Indus Valley seals with a hypnotic fluidity, a sinuous line that undulates like a snake in motion or ripples on the surface of a river. This elegant ambiguity is precisely what makes it one of the most debated symbols in the entire script. At first glance, the glyph's curves seem to mirror the natural movement of water, a force that shaped every aspect of Indus life. Their cities thrived along riverbanks, their farmers relied on seasonal floods, and their artisans channeled water into sophisticated drainage systems. A seal from Mohenjo-Daro even shows the wavy glyph alongside fish and jar symbols, reinforcing the aquatic connection. But tilt your perspective slightly, and those same curves evoke the muscular grace of a cobra poised to strike, an animal that would later dominate South Asian symbolism as a guardian of fertility, wisdom, and cosmic energy. Take the hydrological angle first. The Indus civilization's survival hinged on mastering water's rhythms. Archaeologists have found evidence of massive reservoirs and irrigation channels at sites like Dolavera, where monsoon rains were harnessed with near-modern precision. The wave glyph often appears near grain storage areas, suggesting it might have denoted water allotments or flood levels. One tablet from Harappan pairs the symbol with vertical notches, possibly tallying cubits of river depth, while another shows it intersecting with a grid like a canal cutting through farmland. These practical applications align with Mesopotamian usage, where similar wavy lines represented water in administrative records, yet the serpent interpretation slithers into focus with equal force. Later Indian traditions are steeped in serpent symbolism. The Naga deities of Hinduism, the coiled Kundalini energy of yoga, even the protective snake motifs adorning everything from temple doorways to village pottery. A few Indus seals push this theory further. One particularly striking example carves the undulating glyph with a flared hood at one end, eerily reminiscent of a cobra's stance. Another places it near a horned figure, mirroring Mesopotamian depictions of gods holding serpents as emblems of divine authority. The most tantalizing clue comes from a broken amulet found near a ritual platform. The glyph spirals inward, forming a perfect Ouroboros, the ancient symbol of cyclical time. The glyph's duality might be intentional. Unlike the rigid unicorn or the geometric ladder, this symbol thrives in ambiguity, its meaning shifting with context. On a merchant seal, it could chart river trade routes. Stamped on a priest's amulet, it might invoke serpentine protectors. Even the carving style reflects this flexibility. Some waves are etched with gentle, even strokes, others with jagged peaks as if capturing rapids or a reptile's scales. What lingers is the glyph's refusal to be pinned down. Water and serpents weren't just resources or omens to the Indus people, they were forces that shaped their cosmology. The same river that nourished their crops could unleash devastating floods, just as the serpent that threatened could also symbolize regeneration. In that sense, this glyph isn't a puzzle to solve but a mirror, reflecting a civilization comfortable with paradox, where symbols held room for both the practical and the sacred, often in the same elegant curve. Amid the menagerie of animals and geometric precision, the cross glyph stands out with stark simplicity, two lines intersecting at right angles, a shape so fundamental it appears in nearly every ancient culture. But here's what sets the Indus Valley version apart. These crosses aren't uniform. Some are balanced perfectly, their arms equal in length like a plus sign. Others slant subtly, one line longer than the other, while a rare few curve at the ends as if the cross is spinning in motion. This variation isn't random. Each twist and tilt might encode a different meaning, a visual language we're only beginning to decipher. Start with the solar theory. Several seals pair the cross with radiating lines or circle motifs, suggesting a connection to celestial cycles. One tablet from Harappan shows the glyph enclosed within a ring, its arms touching the edges like sunbeams, a striking parallel to later Bronze Age solar symbols found as far away as Scandinavia. In the Indus context, this could have represented the solstices or equinoxes, critical markers for planting and harvest in an agrarian society. But there's a twist. Some crosses appear alongside clusters of dots, often arranged in groups of 4 or 8. Could these have been early tally marks tracking lunar phases or market days? Then there's the directional angle. Unlike later Christian crosses, which carry explicit spiritual meaning, the Indus glyphs might have served as practical guides. Excavations at Dolavera reveal city blocks aligned precisely to cardinal points, their streets mirroring the cross's symmetry. A ceiling found near a granary shows the symbol flanked by 2 fish glyphs, one pointing north, the other south, possibly a merchant's mark for trade routes. Even more compelling are the chained crosses, where multiple symbols link together in a line. Archaeologists speculate these could have mapped caravan trails or irrigation channels, each intersection marking a stopping point or distribution node. The counting system theory adds another layer. Some crosses appear alongside the Indus script's enigmatic numeral strokes, short vertical lines grouped in specific sequences. A broken pot from Mohenjo-Daro bears a cross with 4 arms, each ending in 3 tiny notches. If each notch represented a unit, was this an early form of multiplication? Compare it to Mesopotamian accounting tokens, where crossed lines denoted exchanges or debts. The Indus glyph might have served a similar function, its arms acting as placeholders in a proto-mathematical system. What's most haunting is how this simple shape resists singular interpretation. The same glyph that guided travelers could have charted the heavens, tallied grain, or even symbolized the intersection of earthly and divine, a reminder that the most enduring symbols are often those that hold multitudes in their intersections. The most iconic composition in the entire Indus Valley script isn't a solitary glyph, it's a scene frozen in miniature, a tableau that repeats across dozens of seals with uncanny consistency. An animal, usually the enigmatic unicorn, stands rigidly before a stylized tree or plant, their poses locked in silent dialogue. At first glance, it seems straightforward, a creature near foliage, perhaps grazing. But the rigid formality of these carvings tells a different story. The animals never nibble or lounge, they stand at attention, their hooves aligned as if mid-ceremony, while the tree rises like a scepter between them. This isn't pastoral art, it's ritual captured in clay. Look closer at the tree's design. Unlike the naturalistic pipal glyph, these plants are schematic, a central stalk with symmetrical branches, often topped by a crescent or loop. Some researchers see Mesopotamian influence here, comparing them to the sacred date palms of Sumerian art, where gods flank trees of life. Yet the Indus version feels distilled, almost abstract. A seal from Harappan shows the unicorn's horn perfectly aligned with the tree's apex, forming a single vertical axis that divides the scene with geometric precision. This isn't a random arrangement, it's a visual mantra, a repeated motif that likely held profound symbolic weight. Theories about its meaning spiral in fascinating directions. One school argues it depicts sacrificial rites the animal presented to a deified plant, akin to Vedic yajna ceremonies where offerings fueled cosmic order. Supporting this, several seals show what might be an altar or incense burner between the creatures and the tree. Others interpret the tree as a world pillar, a concept found from Siberian shamanism to Hindu cosmology, where a central axis connects earthly and divine realms. The unicorn, in this view, becomes a psychopomp, a guide ushering souls along this vertical pathway. The most haunting examples come from Mohenjo-Daro, where the composition fractures into mystery. One worn seal replaces the unicorn with an elephant, its trunk curled around the tree in an almost protective gesture. Another shows two horned men kneeling instead of animals, their hands outstretched as if delivering prayers. These variants suggest the scene wasn't fixed but adaptable, a ritual framework where different actors could occupy symbolic roles. What's absent speaks volumes. Unlike Mesopotamian or Egyptian art, no human monarchs dominate these scenes. The power lies in the pairing itself, beast and plant, earth and growth, bound in perfect tension. Whether it encoded a creation myth, a seasonal ritual, or a merchant's vow to ecological balance, the animal-facing tree glyphs feel like frozen hymns, their verses etched not in words but in the silent language of posture and reverence. Every time we uncover another, it's like hearing a refrain from a liturgy we'll never fully reconstruct, yet whose resonance still hums across 4,000 years. The circle with dots glyph floats through Indus Valley inscriptions like a fragment of celestial code, a perfect ring enclosing clusters of tiny, precise marks, their arrangement never quite the same twice. Unlike the rigid unicorn or the fluid fish symbols, this glyph feels mathematical yet cosmic, as if it held meanings that shifted with the angle of observation. Some versions show a single dot centered like a pupil, evoking an eye or perhaps a solar body. Others scatter dots asymmetrically, 3 here, 7 there, like stars frozen in an ancient snapshot of the night sky. One of the most striking examples comes from a seal excavated near Mohenjo-Daro's granary district, a circle enclosing 12 dots arranged in 2 concentric rings. The precision is uncanny, each dot equidistant from its neighbors, the outer ring aligning perfectly with the cardinal directions. Archaeologists initially dismissed it as a decorative motif until they noticed identical glyphs on tablets buried beneath what might have been an observatory platform. Suddenly, the celestial theory gained weight. Could these dots have mapped constellations? The Indus people traded with Mesopotamian cultures who meticulously recorded Venus's cycles. Might they too have tracked planetary movements? A broken amulet from D'Oliveira deepens the mystery. Its circle glyph contains 5 dots with radiating lines, resembling later Hindu depictions of the 5 visible planets. Yet the numerical interpretation refuses to be eclipsed. Many circle and dot glyphs appear alongside the Indus script's tally, marks short vertical strokes grouped in sequences. A ceiling from Harappan shows a circle enclosing 4 dots superimposed over 7 strokes, a combination that mirrors Mesopotamian accounting symbols for measures of grain. Even more compelling are the positional variations. When the glyph appears near storage jars, dots cluster near the circle's base as if indicating quantity. On ritual objects, they often orbit the perimeter like offerings. One particularly haunting example from Lothal's dockyard carves the circle empty save for 1 dot pressed against its inner edge, a possible symbol for first month or new moon in a lunar calendar. The glyph's adaptability is what lingers. The same circle that charted stars might have counted sacks of wheat. The same dots that represented planets could have tallied shipments of lapis lazuli. In a civilization that left no astronomical treatises or merchant ledgers, these tiny punctures in clay become silent witnesses to a world where the practical and the celestial weren't opposing forces, but 2 sides of the same carefully measured coin. Each variation feels like a different inflection in a conversation we're straining to overhear, a language where the scribe's stylus might leap from inventory lists to star charts in a single fluid motion. The triangular glyphs of the Indus script carve sharp contrasts against the fluid animal motif's precise angles that refuse to blend into the background. Unlike the organic curves of serpents or trees, these symbols feel deliberate, almost surgical in their execution. Some stand as solitary peaks, their bases solid and unwavering. Others interlock like tessellated puzzle pieces, forming diamond or zigzag patterns that ripple across clay tablets with mesmerizing repetition. But what makes them truly enigmatic is their sheer versatility. Could these angular shapes have represented gender distinctions, celestial phenomena, or even the earliest whispers of a script that would evolve into Brahmi centuries later? One cluster of triangular glyphs appears strikingly similar to later Indian symbols for masculine and feminine energy, upright triangles representing the lingam, inverted ones symbolizing the yoni. A seal from Harappan shows a row of alternating upright and inverted triangles, like a visual chant of duality. Archaeologists note that artifacts bearing these symbols often appear in gendered contexts: upright triangles near tools traditionally associated with male burials, inverted ones near spindle whorls and jewelry. But here's the twist: unlike later Hindu iconography, where such symbols carry explicit spiritual meaning, the Indus versions lack accompanying ritual scenes. Were they pragmatic markers for workshops or households, or did their sacred connotations emerge later, repurposed by subsequent cultures? Then there's the architectural theory. Excavations at D'Oliveira reveal city walls constructed with precise triangular buttresses, their shapes mirroring glyphs found on nearby seals. One tablet even overlays a triangle glyph with parallel lines, resembling an early blueprint for roofing techniques. The correlation is too consistent to ignore, especially since these glyphs proliferate in layers corresponding to the civilization's urban expansion. Could stonemasons have used them as shorthand for structural integrity, etching warnings about load-bearing angles into foundation stones? Most tantalizing is the Brahmi connection. Some triangular glyphs bear uncanny resemblances to early Brahmi letters, like the precursor to Ka, which mirrors an Indus triangle bisected by a vertical stroke. Linguists debate whether this reflects direct lineage or mere convergent evolution, but the geometric kinship is undeniable. A potsherd from Lothal shows a sequence of triangles progressively morphing into a recognizable Brahmi character, as if capturing the script's metamorphosis mid-flow. Yet the glyphs resist definitive classification. A handful of outliers complicate every theory, like the stacked peaks motif from Mohenjo-Daro, where nested triangles resemble mountain ranges. Others appear alongside celestial symbols, suggesting astronomical alignments or navigational aids. The more you study them, the more they feel like a geometric language, one where a single angle's tilt could shift meaning from mountain to mother to measure. In their silent precision, they hold the essence of a civilization that thought in shapes long before words solidified. The final glyph isn't a single symbol at all, it's a symphony of shapes, a masterful interplay of multiple glyphs carved together on the iconic Indus Valley seals. These composite designs transform simple impressions into miniature narratives, where unicorns stand beside trees, fish swim beneath boats, and horned figures raise their hands toward celestial symbols. Unlike standalone glyphs, these combinations feel intentional, layered like sentences written in a language we've yet to fully understand. Take the famous unicorn and altar seal, discovered by the dozens across Mohenjo-Daro. The same scene repeats with eerie precision. The mythical beast faces a ritual object flanked by a row of 7 cryptic signs above. This isn't random artistry, it's a deliberate formula, a visual phrase that held enough importance to be stamped again and again into history. Theories about these composites spiral in fascinating directions. The mercantile explanation seems obvious at first: seals pressed into clay tags or bales of goods, serving as trademarks for powerful merchants or guilds. A seal found near Lothal's docks pairs a ship glyph with clusters of grain tallies, practically shouting, "Export ready." But then you encounter composites that defy practicality, like a haunting tablet from Harappan where a horned figure kneels before a tree, their hands cradling a tiny circle that could be a fruit, a coin, or even the moon. This isn't inventory, it's invocation. The spiritual angle deepens when you notice how often sacred motifs recur: the tree, the altar, the eye intertwined with what might be personal or clan symbols. Were these seals devotional objects, stamped not just on goods but on offerings or temple doors? The sequencing adds another layer of mystery. Unlike Egyptian cartouches or Mesopotamian cuneiform, where glyph order follows clear rules, Indus composites fluctuate. A unicorn might face left on one seal, right on another. A fish glyph could appear above a tree here, below it there. Some researchers see this as evidence of proto-writing, where position altered meaning. Think of how "dog bites man" and "man bites dog" tell opposite stories with the same words. Others argue the variations reflect regional dialects or shifting rituals over centuries. One particularly provocative seal from Dolivera stacks glyphs vertically like a totem pole: horned man at the base, tree in the middle, star at the apex, a possible cosmological map of underworld, earth, and heavens. What's most striking is the craftsmanship. These composites weren't hastily etched. Their creators wielded tools with micrometer precision, ensuring each curve and angle aligned perfectly across thousands of impressions. A seal from Mohenjo-Daro crams 14 distinct glyphs into a space smaller than a thumbnail, yet every detail remains crisp. This wasn't folk art, it was a specialized skill, likely guarded by scribes or priests who understood the symbol's power. The wear patterns tell their own story. Some seals are polished smooth from use, their edges rounded by generations of hands pressing them into clay. Others, like a pristine composite found in a buried cache at Calibangan, show no signs of use at all, suggesting they were ceremonial, perhaps even too sacred to be stamped on mundane objects. The composite's decline mirrors the civilization's twilight. Later examples grow cruder, their once intricate glyphs blurred together. A seal from the final layers of Mohenjo-Daro reduces the classic unicorn andalta to a ghostly outline, its message fading along with the culture that birthed it. Yet even in their erosion, these composites cling to their secrets. Holding one, you're left tracing the grooves where ancient fingers once pressed, wondering if you're touching a merchant's signature, a prayer frozen in clay, or both a reminder that for the Indus people, commerce and cosmology might never have been separate worlds to begin with. For all their intricate beauty, the glyphs of the Indus Valley script guard their secrets with stubborn resolve. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs cracked open by the Rosetta Stone's bilingual inscriptions, or Mesopotamian cuneiform deciphered through thousands of verbose clay tablets, these symbols offer no such footholds. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the remaining fragments refuse to interlock. That's the frustration scholars face, a script frozen mid-sentence, its context evaporated into time. Start with the most glaring obstacle, the absence of a bilingual text. Every successful decipherment in history relied on this crucial key. The Rosetta Stone paired Greek with hieroglyphs. The Behistun inscription juxtaposed Old Persian, Elamite, and Akkadian, but the Indus Valley left no such linguistic Rosetta. Their seals and tablets stand isolated, their glyphs whispering in a language with no known relatives. Even if we could match a symbol to a word, we'd have no dictionary to confirm it. Some researchers have tried linking the script to later Brahmi or ancient Sumerian, but the gaps are too vast. Without a shared phrase, a royal title, a prayer, even a simple "this belongs to," every translation remains guesswork. Then there's the brevity. Most inscriptions are shockingly short, 5 glyphs on average, with the longest stretching merely 26. Compare that to Mesopotamian tablets crammed with epic poems or Egyptian tomb walls dense with incantations. The Indus script feels like reading random phrases torn from a book: unicorn facing tree, jar beside fish. Are these labels names, fragments of poetry? The silence between glyphs swallows the meaning whole. Some argue these weren't meant to convey complex ideas at all. Perhaps they were mnemonics, triggering oral recitations now lost. A seal bearing 7 glyphs might have been shorthand for a 7-verse hymn, with the symbols acting as prompts rather than a full transcript. This sparks the most heated debate: is it even writing? Some linguists, like the late Asko Parpola, point to the script's structured repetition, certain glyphs clustering at beginnings or endings of sequences as evidence of syntax. Others, like Steve Farmer, counter that the symbols lack the variability of true writing systems. In Mesopotamia, scribes generated thousands of unique combinations to record everything from tax receipts to love letters. The Indus corpus, by contrast, cycles through the same finite set of glyphs. Could these have been proto-writing emblems denoting clan identities or commodity types without encoding spoken language? The debate divides academia, with each new discovery fueling both sides. A 2021 study of computational patterning reignited hopes by showing Indus symbols share statistical features with known scripts. Yet skeptics note that even non-linguistic systems like highway signs or alchemical symbols can exhibit similar patterns. Adding to the confusion is the script's sudden uniformity. Across 1 million square kilometers and centuries of use, the glyphs barely vary. No regional dialects, no evolutionary drift, just the same unicorns and trees stamped from the mountains to the sea. Such consistency is unheard of in other ancient scripts, which typically splinter into local variants. Did a central authority control writing so tightly? Or was this lesser language and more a symbolic code, like heraldic crests, meant to be recognized rather than read? Perhaps the greatest challenge isn't technical but cultural. The Indus people left no king lists, no bombastic battle chronicles. Their cities lacked the monumental ego of pharaonic Egypt or the boastful steles of Assyria. If their script was primarily administrative, tracking grain, marking pottery, we might never find the dramatic texts that make decipherment thrilling. Their silence feels intentional, as if they wrote not for eternity but for the moment, their clay seals dissolving back into the earth once their practical purpose was served. Technology offers glimmers of hope. Recent AI analyzers have tentatively linked some glyphs to Dravidian root words, suggesting the script might encode an early form of Tamil or Brahui. Three-dimensional imaging has revealed subtle carving techniques that could hint at scribble schools. Yet even these advances feel like holding a conch shell to your ear. You catch the echo of an ocean, but the waves themselves remain just out of reach. The glyphs endure not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a mirror reflecting our own limits. They remind us that some silences, no matter how fervently we listen, refuse to break. The echoes of the Indus Valley glyphs ripple far beyond their time, whispering through millennia to resurface in the symbols and rituals of modern South Asia. Take the pipal tree glyph. Its heart-shaped leaves and sacred associations mirror the revered Bodhi tree under which Buddha attained enlightenment. Centuries after the Indus cities faded, the same tree appears in Hindu and Buddhist art as the cosmic axis, its roots in hell and branches in heaven. Even the act of circumambulating sacred trees, practiced today in temples across India, might trace its origins to those ancient seals where figures kneel before stylized plants. The parallels aren't coincidental. Their cultural DNA passed down through generations who no longer remembered the original artisans but preserved their visual language in collective memory. Then there's the swastika glyph, its arms spinning like a celestial wheel. Long before it became a tainted emblem in the West, this symbol pulsed through Indian spirituality as a marker of auspiciousness. In Hindu rituals, it's drawn with vermilion powder during weddings and festivals. In Jain temples, it represents the four states of existence. The Indus version, carved 2,000 years earlier, shares the same geometric precision and, crucially, the same dual orientation, with arms spinning both clockwise and counterclockwise. This variation wasn't arbitrary. Later Vedic texts describe the right-facing swastika as solar and masculine, the left-facing as lunar and feminine, a balance of cosmic forces the Indus people might have already encoded in clay. The Horned Man glyph offers another startling bridge across time. His rigid posture and wide, owl-like eyes find eerie counterparts in later depictions of Shiva as Pashupati, lord of animals. A famous seal from Mohenjo-Daro shows the horned figure seated in a yogic pose, surrounded by beasts, a composition mirrored in medieval statues of Shiva meditating in forests, serpents and tigers at his feet. Even the horns themselves persist. Tibetan Buddhist monks still wear headdresses with curved horns during rituals, while village shamans in Rajasthan don horned masks to channel deities. The continuum suggests these weren't just artistic choices but threads of a spiritual vocabulary rewoven across epochs. Water symbolism flows just as persistently. The fish glyph, so prevalent in Indus trade records, evolves into the Matsya avatar of Vishnu, the deity who takes piscine form to save humanity from the cosmic flood. The serpent or wave glyph, with its undulating curves, resurfaces as the Naga spirits worshipped at water sources across South Asia, their coiled bodies guarding village wells. Even the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, with its precise proportions and ritual associations, prefigures the step tanks of Hindu temples where pilgrims immerse themselves for purification. The connection isn't merely visual, it's functional, a shared belief in water as the conduit between mundane and sacred realms, but the most profound continuity might lie in abstraction. The geometric grid glyph, with its nested squares, anticipates the yantras of tantric tradition, intricate diagrams used for meditation, their lines mapping cosmic order. The concentric circles and dots that once tallied grain shipments now form column designs at Tamil thresholds, welcoming prosperity. Even the humble pot glyph transforms into the kalasha, its rounded belly symbolizing abundance in ceremonies from Bengal to Gujarat. These aren't stagnant holdovers but living adaptations, proof that symbols outlast the civilizations that birthed them, mutating to fit new worldviews while retaining whispers of their first meanings. Yet the relationship isn't one of simple inheritance. The Indus people didn't hand down a finished symbolic lexicon. They planted seeds that later cultures cultivated in their own soil. What we're witnessing isn't a straight line but a spiral where motifs depart and return, altered yet recognizable, like a melody played across millennia on different instruments. Holding a modern Hindu yantra beside an Indus seal, you're not just seeing resemblance, you're hearing the long, slow conversation of humanity reaching for the divine in forms that transcend any single tongue. The glyphs endure not as relics but as participants, still speaking in the silent language of shapes that stir something older than memory in those who trace their lines today. Modern technology is peeling back layers of time on the Indus script in ways that would astonish early archaeologists. High-resolution 3D scanning has revealed microscopic details invisible to the naked eye, tool marks showing whether a glyph was carved in one confident stroke or multiple tentative scratches, subtle variations in depth that might indicate scribble schools or regional styles. One scan of a unicorn seal from Harappan uncovered faint guide lines beneath the surface, evidence that these artisans worked with the precision of master calligraphers, sketching drafts before making final impressions. Another breakthrough came with reflectance transformation imaging (RTI), a technique that photographs objects under varying light angles to enhance surface textures. When applied to a worn tablet from D'Oliveira, it exposed ghostly traces of erased glyphs, palimpsests hinting at administrative revisions or reused materials, offering glimpses of bureaucratic processes frozen in clay. Artificial intelligence is tackling the script's structural mysteries. A 2022 project trained machine learning algorithms on the entire corpus of known inscriptions, about 4,000 artifacts searching for statistical patterns in glyph placement. The AI flagged recurring clusters that human eyes had overlooked, like a fish symbol appearing 73% of the time to the left of numerical strokes, suggesting it might have functioned as a determinative, a sign clarifying categories. More provocatively, neural networks identified potential syntax trees, repeated sequences where certain glyphs occupy fixed positions, much like subjects and verbs in sentences. One such pattern involves a horned man glyph consistently followed by a ladder and then a jar, a trio that might represent priest ascending offering or some other ritual formula. Chemical analysis adds another dimension. Portable X-ray fluorescence (PXRF) scanners have detected trace elements in the clay itself, linking seals to specific production centers based on mineral signatures. A unicorn seal found in Mesopotamia was confirmed as Indus made through its distinct potassium-zinc ratio, proving long-distance trade networks. Even more intriguing are residues clinging to the glyphs. One boat symbol seal from Lothal still carried microscopic salt crystals, likely from being pressed into maritime cargo tags. These material clues transform the script from abstract symbols into tactile artifacts, each carrying physical evidence of its journey through ancient hands. Yet formidable obstacles remain. Unlike decoding the Maya script where colonial-era dictionaries provided linguistic footholds, the Indus language has no known relatives, leaving computers to analyze structure without semantic anchors. The script's brevity frustrates statistical models. With most inscriptions under 10 glyphs, there's insufficient data for algorithms to confidently predict meanings. Even 3D imaging hits walls when glyphs are too eroded, a haunting example being the 12-sign inscription from Mohenjo-Daro, where advanced scanning could only recover 7 legible symbols, the rest dissolved into spectral smudges. Perhaps the most promising frontier lies in cross-disciplinary synthesis. A 2023 study combined epigraphy with archaeoastronomy, noting that certain glyph sequences align with celestial events recorded in Mesopotamian tablets from the same period. The fish over crescent motif appears exclusively on seals from layers corresponding to 2090 BCE, the year Babylonian records note a total lunar eclipse during the harvest season. Could this glyph pair have marked an ominous celestial omen? The answers may lie not in any single technology, but in the weaving of multiple digital and analog threads, slowly braiding together a rope sturdy enough to pull these whispers from the past into the light. After centuries of study, the glyphs of the Indus Valley Civilization remain one of history's most tantalizing locked doors. We've mapped their cities, marveled at their plumbing, and traced their trade routes across continents, yet their written words hover just beyond comprehension, a conversation we can see but not hear. Imagine if we could finally decipher them. Would they reveal meticulous tax records showing the economic machinery behind those grid-planned streets, sacred hymns invoking gods whose names we've forgotten? Or perhaps even personal letters, the hopes and grievances of people who laughed, loved, and worried under those same monsoon skies 4,000 years ago. The weight of what we might learn is staggering. This wasn't some fledgling society. It was a peer to Egypt and Mesopotamia, a civilization that mastered urban living while Europe still clung to the Bronze Age. Their glyphs could rewrite our understanding of everything from early mathematics to the roots of yoga. Each symbol we've explored today holds its own kind of magic. The unicorn glyph, stamped on hundreds of seals yet never explained. The fish that might be a syllable, a deity, or both. The horned man whose eyes seem to follow you across millennia. Which one lingers in your mind? Is it the boat glyph, so precise we can almost hear the creak of its ropes? The swirling swastika, its arms spinning with meanings we've half recovered? Or perhaps the tree, its roots tangled with later traditions yet its original significance still shrouded? There's a haunting intimacy to these choices, like selecting which voice from a chorus you'd most want to hear clearly if the static of time could suddenly clear. What makes this mystery endure isn't just the intellectual challenge, it's the humanity. These aren't abstract puzzles but fingerprints left by hands like ours, craftsmen pressing seals into clay, merchants tallying goods, priests carving prayers. Every failed decipherment, every new technological breakthrough brings us closer to them even when the script resists. And that's the heart of history, not just knowing what happened but who it happened to. So the next time you see a symbol, whether on an ancient artifact or a modern street sign, pause a moment. Wonder about the minds that shaped it, the meanings it's carried, the stories it could tell if we learned its language. And if this journey into the Indus Valley has stirred your curiosity, there are countless other historical enigmas waiting. From the undeciphered Rongorongo of Easter Island to the cryptic Voynich manuscript, our past is a mosaic of mysteries, each piece a chance to touch the thoughts of those who came before us. The glyphs may be silent for now, but they're still speaking, if only we can learn to listen.